Hello everyone, welcome to Describely, and today we are going to learn FastAPI authentication using the test-driven development. So initially we're going to go through the introduction and that we are doing right now. And once this introduction is done, we are going to do the project setup, and there we will clone a repository that I have prepared for you, and that is on the GitHub. You can also clone that in your local and you can follow me along. That repository contains the Docker setup and there is no pre-written code. So that contains a couple of containers that you will need for this lecture, like my SQL container to use the database and Mailpit to use the email service and a couple of more. After that, we will set up the models and migration. So we will create the models in our code base, and after that, we will use the Alembic to generate the migration, and then we will run the command to apply that in the database. Once we have the database ready, we can go to the PyTest configuration. So we can configure the PyTest to write our test cases in our application. Once we have configured the database and the PyTest, we can start writing our APIs and the test cases. So we will go through the user registration API first so that we can create a account of a user, and there we will also learn how to hash a password and store that in the DB. Next, we will do the email configuration, and after the email configuration is done, in the same section, we are going to create a unique link, and that link is going to be valid for only one attempt, and we will send that to the user for the account verification. And once that is sent, we will do the account verification API, and there we will use that unique link. We will accept that unique link as a parameter of the API, and we will activate the user account. So in this section, we are going to learn how we can verify the link and how we can add couple of conditions to make sure that the request is authentic. And once the user verification is done, we are going to work on the user login API. So before we start the user login API, we are going to create one more model, that is user token, and we will apply that to the database. And in this model, we are going to store the couple of keys that we will need while generating the tokens. And also it will contain the expiry time of the tokens that we send to the user. So using this table, we can expire any token that we have already sent to the user. So this is going to be very interesting. And once we are done with the user login API, we will go through the refresh token API. So in the user login API, we will send the access token as well as the refresh token. So using that refresh token, user can request a new token because our access token is not going to be valid for a long time. So user will need a new token. And once the refresh token is done, we can go to the forget password. So in this, user can use their email address to request a password reset link. So once the user submits their email, then what we will do, we will send an email to the user, and that will contain a unique link, and that will be again going to be valid for only one attempt. So when the user uses that link to set the new password, and for that we are going to create a reset password API. So this reset password API is going to consume the payload that we have sent during the forgot password. So using this, we are going to update the user password, and we will also write the test cases for all of these API that we are creating. Once the reset password is done, then we are going to learn how we can protect our APIs. And the first API that we are going to create a user authenticated user detail API. So in this API, we are not going to query the database. We will write the logic and we will get the user detail from the token itself. Okay, and we will use the dependency injection and all. So this is again going to be very interesting. Once the authenticated user detail API is done, we will create one more API, and that will be a protected API again. And here we will fetch the some data that requires the access token. And not only these things, we are going to learn many more concepts throughout this video session. This is going to be a long video because we are going to learn lots of things. So I will say that start from the beginning and complete it to get the complete understanding. So let's see the demo of the PyTest. So if I press enter, you can see that it has collected the 28 test cases and it's running now. So let's wait for a couple of seconds. Okay, so it has completed 28 test cases. You can add more if you want. I will explain this throughout this video tutorial. And you can see that we have forget password, get user detail, refresh token, reset password, user login, user registration, user verification. So we are going to cover all the APIs that is required for the user authentication and all. To set up the project in local, we can clone this repository. I am going to put this link in the description, so you can also use the link to clone in your local machine. And for this repository, you will need the Docker. So you can search for the Docker download, and you can download the Docker based on your operating system. And once you have downloaded this, start this Docker container, and let me clone the repository. So you can click on this code, and you can click on this HTTPS, and then click on this copy button. After this is done, go to the terminal. Here I am on my desktop, and you can say git clone and paste the link. So this is going to clone the repository, and let's see the documentation how we can set up. So it says install the Docker and start it. So we have done that. Clone this repository. So we have already cloned this. Open the terminal and navigate to the project folder. So I am there. Now we need to create this volume. So we can copy this command and we can paste this in our terminal. So this is going to create a virtual volume in your system, and that will be a Docker virtual volume. So whatever we put in inside our database, right, that is going to be persisted inside this volume. Once this is done, we can navigate to the project. So we can say cd, and the project name is here FastAPI SQLAlchemy Alembic, right? So I want to rename this actually. So I will say move FastAPI SQLAlchemy Alembic to FastAPI Auth TDD. So now I will go to this inside this folder, and now we can build the project by saying this docker compose build. So this is build is done now. We can start this by saying docker compose up. So our project is started at port 800. You can see it here. FastAPI, the name of the application, and it's running on port 8000. So we can go to the browser and we can just open the localhost port 8000. You can see this message, that means our application is working. If you want to see the Swagger documentation, you can put the /docs. So currently we don't have anything. You can also find the link regarding all the containers that we have. So you can see the FastAPI link that we have already seen, the API documentation we have seen. If you want to connect to the database, you can click on this localhost 8080, and this will open the adminer. So here you will need the credential, right? So if you go to this documentation again, you will see this MySQL related things. So this will be in your project.env file as well. So you can use the host as MySQL, user as a root, and password as a describely &123. So let me change the host to MySQL. User is root, and let me paste the password. If I log in here, you can see that there is a pre-created database that is called FastAPI. So if I go inside this database, you will see there is no table and all. So we have successfully set up our project. Here I have opened the FastAPI of TDD project that we cloned inside the Visual Studio Code. So if I open the Alembic folder, you will see there is a 2 migration. So we can delete this migration because we are going to create this in couple of seconds. Let me walk you through the folders. So in this Alembic, we are going to create the migration files. Inside this application folder, we have a config folder, and here we have configured the database connection using the SQLAlchemy. In the settings.py, this lines we have imported here to load the .env file that we have here. And after that, we have created a class settings that is again extending the base setting that is coming from the pydantic. And I have added application name debug, and you can see here MySQL related credentials, and we are getting these value from the environment variable. And I'm creating the database URI, and this database URI is again I'm using inside this database.py. Using this get setting method, you can fetch the setting detail. Inside the models.py, I have the user model, so we will modify a little bit in a minute. In main.py, simply I have imported the FastAPI class, and I have created an instance, and then I have added the instance here. Initialize this function here, and we have a root URL that is displaying our message. So this is very basic setup. There is no API and code written this. So now let's start working on this. So let's configure our models. Okay, so let me close these files. And inside the models, you will see that we have a user.py. So here we have the user table, and it contains ID, name, email, mobile, password, is active, verified it, updated and created it. Okay, so actually we don't need this mobile, so let me remove this mobile. Okay, so we have a ID, name, email, password, verified it, updated it and created it. So I think this is fine. What we can do, we can generate the migration for this. For that, we can go to our terminal, and let me stop this container, and we can say docker compose. And if you go to this documentation, right here, you will find the command that I'm going to run. So you can just copy this command also if you want to generate the migration automatically using the models. So you can say create my user table. So this has generated the migration. If we go to this Alembic version folder, you will see that our user table migration is created. And if you want to apply that, you can go to this repository again, and you can copy this command, and you can run this command again in the terminal. And once you run this command, right, and again start the application. So now we have created our users table. If we go to our database, and to go to the database, you can open the 8080 port here, and for this you can say MySQL host. We have added MySQL, username is root, and password we can paste. And if we click on login, you can see the FastAPI database is already created for you. If we go inside this, you will see that user tables is created, and it has all the fields that we have configured in the model. So our model setup is done. For the testing configuration, so let me copy and paste the code here. Okay, so here you can see that I'm importing the system module, OS module, and generator module. So this is couple of imports. Test client we are importing from the Starlet, and then here I'm appending the path. So basically this file is inside this test folder, right? And whenever we import something from this application folder, right, it doesn't know if I, so that's why we need to actually append this path uh, into the system, so that whenever we import something, uh, it imports correctly. Okay, apart from this, I'm importing the base from the database and the get session. So if you open the database, you will see this base we are importing, declarative base actually, that is coming from the SQLAlchemy, and we are importing this get session method because we need to override this get session to use the SQLite instead of MySQL. And here I have created some constant. Username is my name, and user email is kesari@describely.com, and some random password. So here I'm configuring the engine, that is SQLite. So this is FastAPI.db, and then I'm configuring another session similar to what we did inside the database. So if we go here, you can see that we have created the session local, and this uses this engine, that is MySQL engine, right? But for the testing environment, we will be using the SQLite. So that's why we need to configure the engine again, and we need to create the session again. And this actually, here I created a fixture. So let me give the scope. So the scope of this fixture is a function, and similar to what we have here, right, get session. So this is going to give us test session, and since this get session is using this session local, that is my SQL session, So this test session is going to use the session testing, that is the SQLite session. And again, there is a application instance, and that we are actually uh, importing from this main.py. So you can see here we are importing this app from main.py. So what we are saying in this fixture, so we are saying whenever this application is called, right, what you need to do, you need to create all the migrations that we have. Okay, I mean, you need to create all the tables using the models, and once the application has been successfully executed, drop all the tables, so that for every test cases we have a fresh database. And this fixture basically creating a client, and you can see that we are actually doing the dependency injection for this application instance and this test session. And here we are creating the test db, that is this the get session only. So what we are doing, we are saying the application test. So whenever this test application is running, we need to override this get session dependency to this test db. So this basically will override this dependency. So whenever we call the get session in our actual application, right, whenever the test is running, it will use this test db, and ultimately this is going to use the test session that is coming from here. So I hope this makes sense. And then we can use this client in our test methods, and this will instantiate the test client using this test application and this test session. So now let's create our first test. And for that, here inside the test folder, I'm going to create another folder, and I will say test user routes. So we don't have any API right now, right? So let's create a user registration API. And for that, I'm just going to create the test first, and after that, I will write the API logic. Let me close these files here. So here I can create test user registration. So one thing to remember here, whenever you create a file, right, make sure that you do test underscore. Okay, and to create the test method, you can also say, let's say test, and then you can say create user. So this is our test method, and here I'm just going to import the client. So this client will be injected from this config that we have created, this client method. So we will get the test client here. Okay, so in this one, let me create the data. So what data we will pass in the API? So for I will pass the name, and name we can import from this config. So here we have username, user email, and user password, right? So let me paste the username here. For email, again I can use the user email, and for the password, let's use the user password variable. So let's add the import now. Now we have our data that we need to send as a request payload to the API, right? So if we can call the API response, and then we can use this client. And whenever we create a register method, that is going to be post. So this is post method, and I will assume that my API is going to be users here, slash users, and I can send the data JSON, and this is the data. So this is how I call the API in the test cases, and after that we can verify if the registration was successful. So for that we can say assert, and we can say response dot status underscore code equals to 201. Okay, so this will check if the response code is 201, then this test case will pass, otherwise it will fail. Another thing that we should check here, we can check if the password is not returned, because we don't want to return the password. So we can say assert password not in response.json. So once we say response.json, then we will get a dictionary and it will check if the password is not returned as a user response. Okay, so we have created our first test case. So just to walk you through how this client will get imported. So whenever you create a fixture, right, this fixture and that fixture will be available directly inside your test case. So here we have created a client fixture. So this client fixture, that means this client will be available in our test case whenever we put there. So this will be injected using the dependency injection, and this will be managed by the PyTest automatically. So whenever we call this client.post, right, what will happen? It will go here and it will see that in the client one, it will initialize the test client, and this test client, during the initialization, it will see here that app test needs to be injected here. So once this is called, what it will do, it will create all the tables. Okay, and after that it will execute whatever we have written the test case, and after that it will drop the tables. Okay, and during that, before the execution, what it will do, it will change the get session method wherever we have used the get session method in our application, right? So instead of getting the mysql db session, it will get the session from here, test db, and that is going to be our test session. So this is how this will work. Now let's execute our test that we have written. So we can go to the terminal and let me actually run this container in a detachable mode. So I can say docker compose up -d, so it will run in the detachable mode. Now I can run docker compose run, and we can say fast API service. This command I will put in the documentation of also in the description, and then we can run sh-c, and here we can say PyTest. So once we run this, it will run the test case, and you can see that our test create user has been executed, but what it's returning 404, that means not found. So we have not created the API yet, that's why it is saying that 404. So now let's create the user registration API. Let me close these files, test files. We'll come back to this and in a bit. So for creating the routes, right, I'm just going to create a folder here, and that will be called routes. So I will put all my routes here inside the route folder, and I will also create another folder that will be services. So I will put all my services inside the services folder. For the route, let's create user.py. If you want to keep all the routes in a single file, that is also fine, but for me I like to keep them separated. So let me copy and paste the user route code. So this is the user, this is how we can create the API router, and here you can see that I have added a prefix users, and I have tagged the routes as a users, and whenever there is a route called, right, and route is not defined, let's say someone calls a user slash abc or something, and that is not configured down here, so that will throw 404. Okay, and let's import this route in our main.py. So in the main.py we can go here and we can import this by saying from app.routes import user, and here we can say application.include router, and we can say user dot, we have created the user router. So this is how we can include our router here. And if we go to the browser and if we refresh the documentation, so let me open this again. 8000/docs. We cannot see our route here in this documentation because we have not created any route actually here. Okay, so we need to define the route here first to appear here. So before defining the route, I want to actually create the response and request structure. So let's create that first. For that, I am going to create another folder again here, and that I will call schemas. And here I'm just going to create all the request file that we need. So for this, I can create one file user.py. Okay, And here I can create a class, and I will say uh, register user request. This will take the base model, and this base model will be coming from Pydantic, so we'll import that in a minute. And we will need a name that is going to be a string, and email. This email will be email str, and password. So these are the three fields that we are sending from the test file, right? So these three we will need. Okay, let's import this base model. So from Pydantic, and this email str will also come from Pydantic itself. So we have our request model ready. So let's define our response now. For that also I will create a folder called responses, and inside that I will create a file called base. So I want to provide some configuration for the responses, and that I will put in inside the base. So for this I will copy and paste the code here. So this is basic configuration. So here I'm importing the base model again from the Pydantic and some config dict. And here I'm saying from attribute true, that means from model it will pick the response field, and arbitrary type allowed, that means whenever I return a date time and all, right, that will be allowed, because that is not the data type that Pydantic has. So it says like any arbitrary value that you want to return, any type that you want to return, you can configure by yourself. So let's now create our user.py. Inside this, I want to create a class called user response. So whenever I need to return the user object, right, I'm just going to use this class. So I will say user response, and this will extend our base response class that we created. Okay, and I want to return the user ID, that is going to be int, and name, that will be str string, email, that is going to email str, and this email str we will import from Pydantic. Let's see what other fields we have in our database. So we have is active, so we can return the is active as a boolean fields. And apart from that, I want to return the created at as well. So I can say created at, and this will be union of str, none, and date time. So why I am doing this? So let's say if you create any user, right, and if that user doesn't have any value, that means in that case the doesn't have any created at value, that means it is a none. And I'm not sure if I'm going to return the datetime object or the str, so that's why I put the str, so that it's supported, I don't have to fix this here. So this typing comes from that, sorry, this union comes from the typing. So our response is also ready now. Now let's create the API. So let me close all this. Okay, so here we have our route, right? So we can say add user route, and then we can say post. I'm just going to put the empty string here, that means our route is going to be slash users itself. And I will return a status code of status. We need to return 201 because we have written that in the test cases. So I will say http. Okay, let me import the uh, status from FastAPI. So status.http 201 created, and I will also return the response model, that is going to be our user response that we created. So we can import that. So now we have defined what status code we are going to return and what are the fields that we are going to return, right? Let's create the definition of this route now. So we can say async def register user, and we will get the data, and this data will be let's see our request class name. So register user request. So this data is going to have all these fields. So this will be validated if any of the field is not present or the data type of the any of the field doesn't match what we have defined here. It will throw 422 error. Apart from this, I will also get the session here, and this session is going to be session, and this will be depends, and this depends we will say get session. Okay, so this session not from request, this will be from SQLAlchemy .orm. So this session object will come from SQLAlchemy.orm. So we have created our definition. Now we need to return something here. So I will just say pass here. And if we go to our browser and if we refresh our routes, right, we should see a user register here. So our application did not work. Let's see why. Okay, so let me actually see the logs. So for checking the logs, we can say docker docker logs -f and then the container name. So in our case, it's a FastAPI. So we can say cannot instantiate typing.union. That means there is some error with the typing. So if I go to our response class, typing union. Okay, so this has to be a list, not a tuple. So it should be fine now. If we go to our class, now it says import error, email validator is not installed. So we need to install this package. For that, let me actually search the latest version for this. So email validator, and we can say PyPy and 2.1.0. So let me copy this and let me put this docker compose dot requirement.txt, and here we can say 2.1.0. Let me break this. Let's build this. So we can say docker compose up -d, and then we can say -- build. So in this way, this will build the container, and also it will start the container in the detachable mode. So let me run this. So it's recreating our FastAPI container. Okay, so it's started now. Let's see the log again. So you can see that our application is running, and if we go to our documentation again and refresh the page, now you can see the users, register user. So whatever name you see here, right, this name is coming actually from the method name that we have defined here, this name, and this users, whatever tags we provide there, that tags will be displayed here. So now let's create our user registration logic. For that, we have created a folder called services, right? And inside this services, we have not created any file. So let me create user.py. So in this, I will write any logic related to the user. Okay, and for that, let me create async def, and I will say create user account. Okay, and here I will get the data and session. So now let's create the user account. Okay, so for that, we can say user equals to user model. Okay, and we can import this user model from our models dot user. Okay, and then we can say user dot name equals to data dot name. We will be getting this, and then we can say user dot email equals to user dot email, and user dot password equals to user dot password. We need to hash this password. We'll come back to this later. And also we need to make sure that whenever we create the user account, right, it's not active. So I will say false. Okay, and I think let's see if we have any other fields. So let's go to the browser and let's open the user. So we have verified it, updated it, and created it. So let's leave those fields. So here we can say session dot uh, session.add, and we can pass the user object, and then we can say session.commit, and then we can say session.refresh user, and we can return this user. So this is how we can create the user account. Okay, let's import this in our route. So we can just return by saying await and this method. This will take the data. The second is the session, and we need to import this method. So let me import this from app.services import user, and here I can say user dot create user account. So if I save this and if I go to our API documentation, right, you can see here user register user request. So you will see that we need these three fields, and whenever we return a response, right, we will return these four responses. And what kind of response will be? String or null. So those three things that we have defined there. And validation error, whenever a validation happens, so this is the structure where we are going to get the validation error. So let me refresh this page. So you will see here now that our request is going to have these three fields. So whenever we click on the try, right, we need to provide these three fields, and all the successful response, we will get this 201 successful response, and the structure is going to be like this. So this is fine, I hope. So let's go to uh, our code base, and let's write a logic to encrypt this password. For the password, I'm just going to use this passlib library. Okay, so I'm just going to show you again how you can add another library in your Docker container. So you can go to this requirement.txt and you can put passlib, and here I'm just going to say specifically that use decrypt, and I will put the version. So the version is 1.7.4. So this is how we can put the requirement, and if we go to the terminal, we can stop this, and we can again run this command. Okay, so from now onwards, whenever we need to import the library, right, I will just tell you the library, and I will do this quickly so that we don't waste time by adding a library and all. So our passlib installation is done now. We can encrypt the password, and for that I'm just going to create a file here called a security. So all my security related steps I will put inside this file, and here we need to create a password context, and this context will be crypt context, and this crypt context will actually come from the library that we have imported. Okay, so we can say from passlib dot, this will be uh, context import crypt context, and in the context we can say schema, and this schema is going to be decrypt. And another thing we can tell, we can say deprecated, and this deprecated will be auto. So I think that's it. Now we can create our method. So for the method, I'm just going to copy and paste. This is very simple method, two-line method. So you can say here hash password. This will take this password context and hash the password. And to verify the password, we will again use the verify password and password context dot verify. So now let's use this hash method in our user registration API. So we can put a hash password and like this, and we can import this quickly. So this is now imported from our security file. So our user registration API is ready. So if we go to our terminal again, and if we run the test case, it should pass ideally. So let's run this. It is again failing. It says that secret must be Unicode or byte. Okay, so I found the issue. So issue is because I'm get I'm trying to get the email from the user object that is currently doesn't have anything, right? So this should come from data, and same for the password. So that's why when we were passing the null value as a password, and this password will not come from the user, this will come from the data. So once we change that and save the file, and we go to the terminal and run the test again, so you can see that one dot here, that means we have written one test case and that passes. Here you see one warning that is coming from the parsley library, but you can ignore this. I believe that they are going to change this before Python 3.13. Okay, so let's write other test cases and verify that. So I have added couple of more test cases. I don't want to waste the time by typing each of them, so that's why I copied and pasted. So we will go one by one. So if we talk about this one, uh, test create user with existing email, right? So we should not let the user create an account if he is registered. Okay, so this will check that. So if we check our code in our service, we have not added any logic to check if the user is already registered or not, right? So if we run our test case, you can see this test case is failing. That means we need to modify our code to make this work. Okay, so for that we can check if the user exists. So I'm just going to fast forward this. So here I have added the logic. I'm checking if the email is already registered. I mean, if a user with the same email is already registered, in that case, I'm throwing an exception with the status code 400. Okay, and if you see this test case, then 400 is not equal to 201. That means it should pass this time. So if I run the code again, you can say this is still failing. So why this is happening? So if we go to our test case, right? Again, this one. So whenever we call this, what happens? If you remember what I said, for each test cases, it creates the table and it drops the table. That means whenever this test case runs, uh, whatever user is created here in this test case, right, that doesn't exist. That means this is a fresh registration. That's why it gets 201 code here. So one way to avoid this is if we call this test case inside this test case here, right? This will create the user account and then this will be called. Because this method is not yet done, so that's why it will not drop the user detail from the DB. So in that case, while executing this, this will create the user account, and after that, this will call this API again. And now the email is already there in the database, so it will throw 400 error. So if we run this, you should see that this passes now. So we see only 4 test cases that got failed, and our test case, that is test create user with existing email, is not one of them. But there is a problem in this. So this case is dependent on this case. It cannot execute the test case independently. Okay, so this is not good. Okay, so for that I'm just going to tell you another way. So if we go to this config test, right, so here we can create a fixture, and this fixture will be available inside our method, right? So I want to create a fixture that will actually create the user account. So whenever we need the user account, we can use this fixture directly. So we can say def, and I'm just going to create a fixture called user, and this will have the test session. So I will type the code, and I will speed up the video. So here I've created this user fixture. So whenever we need the user that is already there in the database, right, we can call this fixture in our test method as a dependency injection, and this will be available. So I have used the same logic that we have used in this uh, create user account. So this is fine. If you want, you can also call this method directly. This will also give you the same thing. Okay, so that is also fine. I mean, what I mean by call, so what you can do here, you can just call this method inside this fixture directly. Okay, but I don't want to do that. This is fine for my test case. So let's use this user fixture inside our test case. So we can put user here directly. So now our user is already ready. So this will be injected directly from the PyTest. So we can say user.email because I want to use the same email that this user has to create an account, right? If I run the test case again, we should again see the 4 failed test cases. So there is some import error. So if I go to this hash password actually, so we imported this hash password, and this import should be after this uh, path that we have created. So if I import this here, and if I run the code again, you can see this worked as before. If you notice, all the test cases that are failing right now, they are related to the password. So it's not allowing the empty password. Also, your password should not contain only numeric value, or only the character value, or only the alphanumeric value. So we should write a logic to check if the password is strong enough. Okay, so for that, here in the security, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy and paste the code regarding the password strength checking. So let me just copy and put the code here. So this will actually check if the password is strong enough, and it will make sure that password is more than or equal to 8 characters, and it has uppercase, lowercase, and digits, and also at least one special characters. So this constant we need to create. So let me just copy the constant as well and put it here. So this is the list of special characters that must be one of these special character must be inside the password. Okay, so now we can use this is password strong enough method in our service. So if we go to our user service, we can write a condition here. If not, each password is strong enough, and we can pass the password. So password we can get from data.password. And if this condition is not satisfied, I mean the password is not strong enough, let's throw an exception. Here I have added please provide a strong password, but you might want to put like your password must contain alphanumeric characters with a special character, something like that, some appropriate message. Or in the UI, you can just put a message indicating that your password must contain a uppercase, lowercase, digit, and a special character, something like that. But for our scenario, this should work now. So if we run the test cases again, all should pass. So you can see all 7 test cases has passed. One more thing I want to discuss regarding this test cases. So for this API, I have created a one test case. Then I created the API logic, and after that, I added further more test cases, right? But from now on, what I will do, I will list down all the test cases that I require, and first I will write all the test cases, and after that I will create the API and I will append the API logic according to the test cases, so that all the test cases are passing. So next I want to actually create the verify user account API and the test cases. But before that, I want to integrate the email service so that we can send an email to the user and they can click on the link and verify their account. So if I go to the database here, you will see that currently I don't have any user. So our user register API is done. So we can create a user by going to this documentation here. We can say, so I created one user account, and if you go to the database and if we refresh, you can see here the is active says 0. That means account is not activated, and also it's not verified because we don't have the time step in the verified at field. Okay, so once the user is registered, I want to send an email to the user, and I want to send a link, so that by clicking on that link, user can verify their email address, and in the same process I will also activate the user account. So for sending the email, I'm just going to use this FastAPI mail library, and we need a templating engine so that our HTML can be processed, right? So for that, I'm just going to use the Jinja. So these two I'm just going to put inside my requirement.txt, and I will build the container again. Now our container is ready, so we can go and write the email logic. FastAPI mail library, if you scroll down a little bit, you will see that we can configure the configuration like this, and then we can use this fm dot send message to send the message. So I have prepared the code actually. So let me go to the code again, and inside this config, right, I will create a file called email.py. And here I will paste the configuration related things. So you can see here I'm creating the connection configuration, and I'm getting all the values from the environment variable. So mail username, mail password, and all those things that is required. And then I'm creating the fast mail instance using this configuration. Then I've created a method send email. Here I will get the list of recipients, subject, context that is going to be a dictionary, and then template name. And based on this, I will add a background task that will send the email to the user. Here I am using the background task, but if you want to use a fail-safe mechanism, then you should configure, let's say, RabbitMQ and Celery with it. But for this tutorial, I will use this background task. If you remember, in the beginning of the session, I said that we are adding a container, mail pit container, basically to test the email service in local. And for that, we don't need any credential and all. So this use credential has to be false if you are using the mail pit in local environment. So for that only, if you go to the .env file, you will see here I am saying that use credential false, and this says smtp local config. Okay, so this is regarding sending the email in local using the mail pit. But in a live environment, you might want to put the mail username, password, port, server, and all whatever configuration is required by your SMTP provider. Okay, so this is fine. And if you want to check the mail pit, you can go to the browser and you can just go to localhost and 8025. So this is your mail pit. This should be running in your system. And once we send an email, we should see that email here. So I will leave it open. So now we have configured our email, and the first email that I want to send a user registration email, and that will contains a verification link. So here once the user account is created, right, I want to send an email. So I can say account verification email, and here I want to use that email thing to send. For that I prepared the code, and I want to create a separate service for email, so that the code is separated in separate file. Let me copy and paste the code. So this is the code basically that I'm going to use. So I'm just going to use this method send account verification email, and this will accept user model object and the background task. And if you notice that this there is an underline here, we need to create this utils file and verify user verify account. This is a context. I will tell you what this is, and get context string that we need to create inside the user model. So we will create this in a minute. And here I'm generating a token, and we need to also actually create a link, not the backend API link, the front end link, because the link that will be sent inside the email, right, whenever the user click on that, he should be redirected to the front end, not the backend API. Okay, so for that we need the host of the backend, and also the URL path or URL segment that front end is using. So we can, you can update accordingly, and then as a query params, we are going to send the token and the user email. This is not required. This is I'm using for this tutorial only. But if you want to use another logic for this, let's say you create a token and you sign a token, and more complex logic, I mean, I'm not going to do that, but this would be enough for us to go through this video tutorial. Okay, so and after that I'm just creating the metadata that we need to pass inside the template, so the template will have a variable data. Okay, and we are again calling the send email method that we have created inside this config here, this one. Okay, so let's create this front end host in our config. So here I'm just going to put the front end host environment variable, and for now I'm just going to hard code this. So this is going to be http colon slash slash local host 3000. So I'm assuming that my front end is running on this 3000. Let me actually get this from the environment variable. Okay, so our front end host is created. If we go to our email service again, you should see this is fine now. Now we need to create this verify account context and this get context string. So for this, let's go inside the user model and let me actually paste the code. So our get context string is like this. We will get a context, and what this is doing, this is using the context, and also it's taking the last 6 character of the password, and it's taking the updated at timestamp. Okay, and this will be unique string, because let's say you are sending the user verification, right? And let's say user is not verified, then they will have updated at timestamp different. But once user uh, clicks on verify and his account is verified, this updated at will be updated. So this string will be different from what we have sent, right? And someone clicks on that link again, then that link will not be active. Okay, and the same we can use by for resetting the password. Let's say someone clicks on the forget password. In that case also, if someone updates their password, right, so their password will be changed, and the older link that we have sent will not be valid. So using this logic, what I'm doing, I'm just creating a unique token that is valid for one attempt only. So I'm not storing anywhere anything in the database, but I'm just using this kind of things. I think Django also uses similar kind of things regarding the updated end password, so that's fine. Now we have the get context string method. If we go to our service, we need to create this verify account context. So let me actually create a utility folder here, utils, and here I will create a context, or let me call it email context. And inside this, this is token context, but let's change it to email context. And this constant we need to put there. So this is just to make the string unique, although it will be unique because whatever is user doing, right, their updated rate will always change. So this will be unique. This is not required, but I am adding some extra thing. Apart from that, in this context we are using the updated date, so we need to make sure that whenever user creates their account, this updated date is added. And also whatever logic we write regarding the user account or user data update, right, we need to make sure that this is updated. So let's go to our user service and see if we are adding the updated date. So we are not adding here, so we can say user dot updated at equals to, we can say date time dot now utc now. So this should be fine. Now let's add the template. To add the template, I'm going to create another folder inside the app directory, and this will be called templates. And inside the templates, I will create another folder. For user related emails, I will put inside the user uh, folder. So here I can create actually account verification .html, and let me paste the code. So this is basic, very simple email, and there is some styling. It says account verification, and here I am just using the welcome and then using the application name that we are passing from the email service. Here you can see application name, username, and activation URL. Three things we are passing. So I'm using the application name, then username, and then the activation URL. Okay, so these are three things that I'm using. So this is very simple template, nothing fancy. If you want to design it better, you can design it. For this image, I don't have a link, so let me remove this actually. So this is fine. And now what we can do, we can use this email in our user registration service. So if I go here, I can just say await and put this method. And what this requires, this requires the user model and the background task, right? So we can pass the user model that we have here, but we don't have the background task yet. So we can say background task equals to background task, and we need to actually get this. So we need to get the background task from here, and let's say go to the route and add the background task. So here we can add the background task. This is going to be, so we can import this from FastAPI. So now this background task is there. We can pass this background task. So we have all three things that is required, and we are passing the background task to this email service. So now if we create an account, right, we should see that email in our mail pit. So actually let's try to run the test cases, and we should see that. We don't have this suppress send actually. So let's go to the email config and let's remove this. This is actually not required. I was testing something. So you can see all the test cases are passing. And if we go to our browser and mail pit service, we can see one email and it says account verification. So you can see welcome to FastAPI and dear Kesari Nandan, thank you for signing up, something like that. And you can see our token that we have generated. This is a token, and here we have the email address of the user. So this email address is same as what we have configured in our test case. This one. Now we have this email, right? We need to create a API to accept this token and the email from the front end and activate the user account. Okay, so let's do that. So here in the routes.py, let me actually duplicate this, and I will say /verify. You can put any verify account or anything. I will leave this like this, and here I will return 200 in case of success. And for response model, I will not going to return the user response. Instead, I will return a JSON response, and this will be verify user account. And here instead of registration request, I will get actually a different request object that will be, let's say, verify user request, and I will get the token that will be string and the email that will be a email str. So we can import this, and we can just put this here and import. We need background task because I want to send a welcome email, and session we need, and here I will change this method to activate user account. So let's go and write this logic. So here this method will receive the same as what we are receiving here. Okay, so let me just copy and paste that. And now we have the data and session and all, right. First we need to check if there is a user with the email, right. So we can say user equals to, and we can copy actually the same thing here. So this will be user exist, and if the user doesn't exist, then we can throw this exception. And here you can say any other message, but I'm just going to say this link is not valid. After that I want to actually get the token, so I will say user token, and this I can get from user dot get context. So this is the user model. Here I am just going to use this method again, so I will actually generate the token again. Okay, so actually this is not user, let me make this user, and here I need to pass the context. So I can say let me go inside this and let me see, this is context equals to going to be user verify account. So now we will get the same token that we have sent in the email, right. And we need to verify that the token that we are getting in this request is same as what we have sent. For that I'm going to use the try, and try we can say token valid. And we, if you remember, while sending the token, right, we have hashed that, so we can use the same. If we go inside this, you will see there is a method called verify password. So we have hashed this, we can use this verify password to verify if the token is valid. So for that let me go to the test service. Here we can say verify password, and this verify password will actually receive two things. One is plain password and the hash password, right. So what is our plain password? Our plain password is the user token that we are generating again from the user model, and hash password is what we are getting from the request. So we can say data dot token. Okay, and then we can say except exception as verify, and if the user is not verified, what I want to do, I want to log the exception. And token valid I will say equals to false. Now here I can say if not token valid, then I can throw an exception saying that the link is either expired or not valid. And if all that passes, then we need to activate the user account. So in that case, we have the user object already. So we can say user dot is active equals to true, and we can say user dot updated at equals to datetime dot utc now. And also we can say user dot verified at time dot utc now. Here I want to send an email that says that account activation was successful. So we can say activation confirmation email. For that, let's go to the email service, and here let me copy and paste the email code again. So this is what I'm just going to send again. So here again I'm getting the user object and the background task, and I'm sending those three things again. Now I'm sending the login URL actually. So in the email, whenever we say that account is activated, right, I want to send a login link in the email, so that user clicks on that login link and they will be redirected to the login URL. That's it, I think. You can see here I'm just going to use the user verification confirmation HTML template, and that is again going to be inside the users folder. So let me go to this folder again here, and let me actually create this file. Let me copy and paste the code again. So this is the template. This is not very fancy. This just says thank you for verifying your account, and we are really excited to have you in whatever app name is family, and your account has been activated. Now you can sign in using the below button. So you can click on this login and it will redirect you there. So this is this is fine, I guess. uh, we have also created the what we call API, and if we go to our API routes, we should see that route here. If I refresh this, you can see we have the /user/verify, and this requires the token and the user email, right? So if I copy the token that I have sent there, okay, but this comes from the test case, right? So this will not work. So let me do one thing. Let me delete this user, and let's create one user account, and also delete this email. So you can delete the email and all whatever you have here, and you can refresh your mailbox. So let me create a user account. So user account is created. You can see the is active is false. That means user is not activated. If I go to the DB, you will see that is active and verified date is not there, but we have the updated date now. And if we go to our mail, you will see that we have received this email, and this is case read describably that we have put there. Now we can use the other API to verify the accounts. For that, let me just copy this link and paste this in the browser. I need this token value, so let me copy this token. Try it out. So token is going to be this value, and email is this one. If I click on execute, you can see that user account is we are returning the user response, which we should not, and now the is active is true, and also verified is that is there. If I go to the DB, you can see the account is verified and is active is true. So our API is working perfectly fine, but what we are doing, we are returning the user object, and that is not good. So during the verification, I don't want to return the user object. So here I will just say await, and I want to return a message. Return JSON response. And if you remember what we said, once the link is used, it should not work, right? So if I go to this UI again, and if I click on the execute again, it should not work. So it's saying that this link is either expired or not valid. So our logic for making the link to work only once is working perfectly fine. But if you remember, in this we have not created any test case yet, right? And in the test driven development, what we do generally, we create the test case first and then we create the actual logic. But I wanted to explain the things here, so that's why I did it like this. But from now on, what we will do, we will create the test cases first, and then we will create the actual logic. So let's go and create the test case for this API. So let's create another file, and now I am just going to say test user account verification, or test user verification .py. Here what I want to do, I want to write actually uh, 4 test cases. So these are the 4 test cases that we can do. So first is to make sure that it's working. Second is to make sure that email is not token is not valid for is valid only for once. And third is to test if the activation is not working with the invalid token. I mean, the user account is not activated with the invalid token. And fourth is uh, account is not activated with the invalid email. So let's say if we have a valid token and invalid email, it should not work, and we have a valid email but invalid token, it should not work, and the link is used, so it should not work in other case and all. So let's do that. So I can say test user account verification. So to get the user account verification, what we need token, right? And we need email. So email, how can we get? We can get email by saying user here. So this way we can get the user, and once we have the user, we can get the token as well. So from this user we can get the token context. So we can get the token context, and this we can say user dot get string context. If you remember, in the user model we have this method, right? Let me go to the models, this one. So I'm using the same method. Let me close these files actually, and now we need to get context string actually. We need to pass the context. So context was user verify account that we have created inside this utils. So let me also check if the name is correct. This one, user verify account. So we can import this now, and we have this token context, so we can create the token by calling the hash password method. If you want, you can create a separate method in your service and you can call this that here, but I don't want to do that, because let's say if you do something unintended in your service, right? In that case, what will happen? You will call that, and it will your test case will also do the same thing. So you should, I mean, in my opinion, you should write a logic to achieve the same thing, but using a different code base, so that your code base is not same what you are doing actually and what you are doing in the test cases. So if both matches, that means that your actual logic is working. So that's why I'm creating again the token and all here. But you can, obviously you can go to your service, and you can create the token. I mean, in the email service you can write a separate method for this, and you can call that method in your test cases and you will get that. But I won't do that. Now we have the token and we also have the email from this, so we can create our request payload, and that will have the email, and email is going to be user.email, and we have password token. This token will be uh, this token what we have generated now. So we can get the response now, and response will be, we can call the client dot post. So we have created a post method, and URL was slash user slash verify, and here we can pass the request payload. Now we need to check if this returns 200. So we can say assert. Here we are saying that response is 200, but we are not sure that user account is activated or not, right? So for that, if you want, you can query the DB here in this one only. So for that, you can get the test session. Okay, so this test session is coming from this fixture again, this one. So we can use this fixture again here, and what we can do, we can write a query to check if it's there. So we can say activated user, and we can say test session dot query, and then we can pass the user model, and this model we need to import dot filter, and we can say user So in this way, we can verify that whatever user account we have activated, and this is the email, right? So we can filter, and we can check if the is active is true and the verified is not none. This is our first test case. This should work, and for that let's test this. So this is failing. This says none type object has no attribute strf time. That means we are not getting the user object here. So why this is happening actually? So let's go to our config and check what we have done here. So actually I want to change this to inactive user. Inactive user, and I will create another fixture. Let's leave it inactive user and let's modify our test case. So here we needed this user, right? Let me change this to inactive user, and also let's change this to inactive user. Okay, so this is failing. This says that none type object has no attribute strf time. That means our updated dash is null. So if you see here, this inactive user doesn't have the updated date. So we need to put the updated date here. So we can say model dot updated date equals to, we can say date time dot utc now, and we can import the date time from date time module. If we run the test case again, you can see our first test case has passed. That means our API is working. Now let's create the test cases for the negative scenario. For that, I'm just going to create the test cases quickly, and I will speed up the video so that you don't waste time here. So here I've created that the test user link does not work twice. What I'm doing, I'm just calling the verify again once, and that should return 200. That means the user account is verified. And if I call the same API with the same data again, that means with the same token again, this should not return 200. And if it's that's happening, that means it's not usable twice. Here I am using that token does not work. Invalid token. This is does not work. So in that case, I'm just putting some random token and I'm checking it should not return 200. And also I'm checking the user account should be false. I mean, is active should be false and verified at is none. And in fourth test case, I'm checking the email does not work. So if we pass the invalid email address, it would not activate based on the token, right? So here I'm just checking the response code should not be 200, and also is active should be false and verified at should be none. So our test case is done, and if we go to the terminal and run the test case again, all should pass. That means our API is secure and it's not doing anything unintended. So this is not returning an exception. This is returning 200. That means second time also our API worked. And if we go to our code base, you can see here we are calling the first time and here we are calling the second time. And if we go to our logic, then here we are generating the token, getting the token, and then we are doing the updated date, and our token depends upon the updated date time. If we go to the user model, you will see that we are having the updated at strf time. So I'm using the second only, I'm not using the fraction of the second. So this could be one of the reason. So for that, let's log this actually, and let's see whenever the request comes to this method, right? If we have the same updated date as we are updating here. So for logging, let me use the logging.info, and let me use the f string. I will say log -1, and here I will log the updated date. So once the request come to this point, I want to log the updated date and I want to see what is the value of this. And again I want to see what is the value of that once we update the updated date. Okay, so here I have the user, and this user is refreshed from the DB, right? So I want to see the updated date again, and this is 2. So if I go here and if I want to see the log, I have to put another command, that is hyphen hyphen log CLI label, and I want to see the info log, so I will say info. If I run the code again, you can see this time it has passed because we have two different updated right here, right? So when a request went there, it was 50, and when we it updated, it became 51. So it was passed. But let's run it one more time. It passed again. Let's run one more time. Again it passed. Here we have 16 and 17. Let's run one more time. Okay, now this has got failed. So this will be very random, because if you see this log, right, so whenever the request reaches to that method, so the second was 32, and when we got the UTC time, right, at that moment also it was 32. So there was a change, but it was a probably millisecond or microsecond of change, but we are using the second. That's why we are getting the same updated date in the context. So that's why it's failing sometime and passing sometime. So when there is a difference, it will pass, otherwise it will fail. So to make this work in our test case, what we can do here, once we create the user account, I can put a sleep here. So for that, time dot sleep, and I want to sleep this 1 second. Let me import the time module. So now if the user is created, after 1 second this API will be called. So there will be a difference when made updated it, and we will our test case should work. So you can see there is a 2 second difference, so that is fine. Let me remove the log and let me run it couple of more times just to verify it's not failing now. Okay, it worked. It worked again. It worked again. So it will not fail now because we have made a difference of 1 second. So this is something I could have fixed this privately, but I wanted to show you how you can display some logs and all whenever you are running the test cases. So let me just remove these logs. Now I want to send the email. So let me put the logic to send the email now. So let's copy the email that we have already done. So this one, and let me put await here. Paste this. Import this. This will need a user and background task. Let's clear out all the emails that we have, and let's run the test case again. Perfect. So we can see 3 emails here. One activate account, this one, and two we have the welcome email that is coming from here, the code that we have added. One is coming from here, and the other one is coming when we call this API first time. Since here we are not doing any registration and all, that's why you don't see this activate a user account API email 2 times. But we should not see this email. I mean, for the testing purpose, it's fine that we can verify. But during during the whenever we are running the test case, let's say in our any CI/CD pipeline, we should not see this email. So here you can see that I have run the test case couple of time, and my email list is populating, right? So we don't want that to, well, whenever we are running the test case, and for that we need to disable this. So to disable this, what you can do, uh, if we go to our config, and here inside this email, right, we have created this fast mail variable. So we can import this fast mail variable into our test config or test cases. So let me go here. So I'm just going to disable this globally, but you can disable this individually in any of the test case that you want. I will show you that also. So here we can say from app.config.email, and we can say import fm. So this fm is this instance actually. And to disable this, we can go to this client here, test client. Whenever our client is called, I want to say fm dot config dot, and if we go to the fast API documentation here, right? Let me find the link. So here you can see that we can disable like this. So if we see fm.config.suppress send, then it will not send the messages. So let me copy and paste it here. Let's first delete all the emails that we have in our inbox. So it's deleted now, and let's run the test case again. If we go to our email box, you can see currently we don't have any email. So this is how you can disable any mail service. Now we have successfully built the user registration API, user account verification API. Now let's build the login API. So let's create the test case first before we create the actual API. Let me quickly close all these files. Inside this folder, I will create another file. I will set test user login, and let me list down the test cases that I want to actually create. Here you can add more test cases if you can think of any. Let's say if you are designing application where you want to allow only one session at a time, so you can add a logic for that also, and any other that you can think of. So I will put dot 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 here. So to create the test case, we need a user whose account is verified and activated, right? So we can get that by calling the verification test case in our login test case, but I don't want to do that. So I will create a fixture again here. So this one is inactive user, and we have set that inactive false. So let's create a user actually, and that will be active. So this will be user, and here we can say true. So this user is activated, and also let's update the verified date, and this will be datetime.utc now. So this user will be verified and activated. We have inactive user, and we also need the unverified user. So we can create an unverified user by setting the verified at none, or let's remove the this completely. So this user will be active but will be unverified, and ideally this should not happen. So if we go to our service, and what we are doing, we are saying user should be inactive, and we are just during the verification we are also updating the updated it and verified it. So I think this is fine. So let me actually copy and paste the code. So I have prepared the code. So here this is the basically test user login. So I'm just going to send the user and password. Let me put this password. So this username, why I want to send, because I want to implement the fast API Auth login, so that I can log in here also. Here you will see the login option. On that I accept the username only. So I will send the username as a email address and password. And once the login is done, I will get the access token, refresh token, and expire in time. Apart from this, user login with wrong password. So I will try to pass some random password, wrong password, and this should not return the 200, it should return the 400. You can say not equal to 200, or you can also put the status code that you are returning. That is fine. With a wrong email, so I will put some random email here, and I will put the correct password, but this should not be able to log in. I can remove this test session, it's not required. Inactive account, so in that case I will import the inactive user and I will try to log in using the correct email and correct password. This should not work. And unverified user also, so I have imported the unverified user. I will get the email, correct email and the correct password, and this should not be able to log in again. So now let's try to run this test case and we'll see if it's working. We can see that all four has failed now. Okay, so let's try to implement the APIs and fix one by one. Okay, so there is an error here. You can see error test user login unverified. So let's see the log. If you scroll down a little bit, it says fixture unverified user not found. So let's check that. Okay, so we have two actually user fixture, but we don't have any unverified user. So if I remember, this is the unverified user. So let me change the name here. Now if I run the test case again, I should not see the error. Instead, I should see the failed. So you can see that three test cases has been failed, and in the login, two of them are passed. So which two passed? Let's see, because we have not written any test case. So here if we go, uh, this two has passed actually, because this is not returning 200. So let's make it 400 actually. Should be equals to 400, and this also be should be equals to 400. So it was returning 405 or 404. That's, I think 404. So that's why it was not equal to 200. That's why we saw that two of them was passed. So let me run this again. You can see all of them are failing now. To create the login API, I need to add another route here, and this will be login. And here I want to return the response, and for that let's create a response class. So inside this user class, user response, I will create here login response. We can import this response class in our route file. Change this method to user login. Let's remove this background task, it's not required. For a request class, I'm not going to create the request class. Instead, I will import one class from FastAPI security. And this will be my request class. So if I go inside this class, you will see that this particular class requires username and password. Username and password. Let's change this method to get login token. We don't need to pass the background task. And regarding the response, whatever I get from this method, I'm just going to return that. So let's talk about what we are going to need for the login API. So first thing, verify user account is active. Second thing, verify that user account is verified. Third thing, verify the email and password. Then we need to generate access token and refresh token and TTL. So these are the actions that we need to perform. Actually, we need to verify that user account is verified first, then we can check if it's active or not. So to generate the access token and refresh token, I'm just going to use the JWT, and for that I'm just going to use this package PyJWT. So I'm just going to install this in the Docker container, and I will speed up the video. When we use this Auth to password request form, right, we need another library that is Python multipart. So that we also need to install. So we can search Python multipart, PyPy, this one. So I'm just going to install, and I will speed up the video. Now let's write the logic. So first we need to check if the email exists or not, right? So first thing we need to verify that if the email is there in our database or not. So in that case, we can check if the user is there, and here we will get the email as a username. So if the email is not there in the DB, then we'll say email is not registered with us. Next thing we need to verify if the password is valid or not. So let me put this point first here. So here we'll say that if not a verify password, so this verify password will return a boolean value here. So if it's the same, then it will return the true, and if it's not same, then it will return the false. So we can say if not verify password, and then we'll throw an exception that email invalid email or password. We are not checking the account is active or verified here, because first we need to make sure that whoever is trying to pass this email and password is a authentic user. That means the user who has created the account, not any phishing or anything, because we don't want to see the confusing message. Now we can check if the user account is active and verified. If the password is correct, then we will check if the user account is verified or not. And if the user account is not verified, then we'll say your account is not verified. Please check your email inbox to verify your account. Or if you want to trigger an email, right? So let's say one email or two email in a 24-hour. So you can call the that email sending method here. This one, this email actually, and the user will get another email to verify his account. And if the user account is verified but it's inactive, then in that case also we will say that your account has been deactivated. Please contact support. Now let's add the logic to generate the token. So here we will say generate the JWT token. To generate the JWT token, I want to create couple of methods inside our this security.py that is inside the config folder. So let me copy and paste. I have prepared those methods. Here I am importing the base64 and the datetime module. And if you see that I have added the str in code, So whatever I'm going to put inside my JWT token, right? I'm just going to encode that base 85. You can use any other base, but I'm just going to use the base 85. And I will also need the logging. So let me import this JWT also. So here you can see this str encode and this str decode. So this decode we will be using whenever we are getting the payload from the token. And this get token payload will return the payload from the token whenever we decrypt that. Okay. And generate token, what will it will do? So we will pass the payload as a dictionary, and it will add the expiry time into this token, and it will generate the token and return that. We also need the time delta. So this time delta is basically will be used for our TTL. So if you see the expiry time, so this expiry time is basically a current UTC time plus our expiry, and that is the time delta that we can pass during uh, calling this method. From the setting, we also need the JWT secret and JWT algorithm, so we need to add that. And in the token payload, we have this username and this sub and all. So I will modify this little bit, but let me just walk you through this. And this load user we can use to get the user detail by Gmail address. Okay, so we can use this load user now in our function here. So here we are trying to fetch the email, I mean user, right? So what we can do, we can say user equals to, we can call this load user, and this is async method. So we can pass this actually data dot username and session. We can import this from the security, so we can remove this line. Let's create this JWT secret and JWT algorithm. So I have already those keys actually, so let me just paste it here. So here we have JWT secret, and that is again getting this from the environment variable. I have added a default value, and JWT algorithm also. I have access token expire in minute and the refresh token expire in minute. So basically I'm just going to use this to add the TTL in our access token as well as in refresh token. So for now, as you see, the default value is 3 minutes, and for the access token and for refresh token it's 1440 minutes. So this is fine. Now if we go to our security, we have not imported the setting, so we can import the settings. And one more thing I want to add here, that is auth to scheme. Okay, so this auth to scheme basically, I want to import this from FastAPI security again, and this I will be using in the API as a dependency. And I'm saying that my API is going to be /auth/login. So whenever we go to our documentation, right, here we will see a login icon. So when we click on that, this /auth/login will be called. And if we go to our API, then here we are saying if we are using the user route, then our API is going to be /user/route. So let's say modify this also, and we can call this, let's say guest. Guest means an unauthenticated user. So I will say auth, and this I will say auth. So I need to change this user router to guest router. Now my API is going to be /auth/login. Before we generate the token, actually I want to create another model, and that model will store the token information in the DB. So for that, let's go to the models in the user models, and here I want to create a user token model. So let me copy and paste the model code. This mapped column we can import actually from SQLAlchemy. Foreign key will be coming actually from SQLAlchemy directly. So we can say foreign key here, and we need to define a relationship between the user model and user token model. Okay, so for that, here I can say tokens and this token will have a relationship. So relationship we can import from FastAPI SQLAlchemy.orm. So we can say relationship. Okay, and this relationship will have the model name. So this is user token models, and we can say back populate. So back populates to user, and we need to define the same here inside the user tokens model for the mapping. We can say user relationship, and this will take the user model, this one, and this will back populates to tokens. Let me remove the model here actually, because we are not following that convention. So this token name should be equal to what you have defined here, and this user should be equal to what you have defined here, and this model name should be the class of your model. So this is how you create a one-to-many relation. If you notice inside this user token model, I have added a access key, refresh key, expire at, and active. So whenever you want to, let's say, disable a particular key, right, you can come to this DB and make that. Actually, let's leave this is active because we don't require this. So you can set the expire at, and that particular key will be disabled. Generate the migration and apply that to DB. So we can come here, and here we can say Alembic revision hyphen hyphen auto generate hyphen m. So message we can say create user token table. Okay, and press enter. So this has generated the user tokens table, access key and refresh key as an index, and this is fine. So if we go to our code base, we should see a two migration here. So this is our user token table. Let's migrate this. So we can say Alembic upgrade head. So if we go to our database, where is this? Here, if I refresh this, you will see user tokens table is created and the foreign key is added from the user table. So now let's put our create token logic, and for that also I prepared the code. So let me close these things. I will explain what I have done there. So let me go to our service, and here we need to generate that. So let me copy and paste that. So this unique string method we have not yet created. So let's go to our utility, and let me actually create a file called string.py, and here I will create that method. So this method is basically going to give us unique strings, and this will use this secret module. So let's import that secret. So this will give us a basically URL safe unique strings. So let's go and import this. Time delta we can import. Setting we have not imported, so let's import the setting here. User token model is not there, it's a user token, so let me import that also. And this will not be DB, this will be session, because we are seeing session in this tutorial. We can import this str in code, and this generate token method also. So we have added this in our security, right? So this method is done actually. So you can see here, for the refresh key I am generating 100 character refresh key, and for the access key I am generating 50 character access key, and then refresh token expire, I am just getting the refresh token expire from the setting that we have added 1440, and then I am creating this user token in the DB. Okay, and after that that user token ID I am encoding, and I am adding as a R here in the token payload, and I am also adding the username and all in the JWT token. So as a N, and access key, this token access key I am adding as a A. Okay, and user ID again I'm encoding as adding as a sub. So this is fine, and after that I'm generating the access token, and we have actually generated the refresh token expiry here, and this is also added in the DB. So we are not adding the access token expiry because that is going to expire in every 3 minutes. So we are adding the expiry time for the refresh token. So if you want to, let's say, expire a token, right, you expire the refresh token, so that further refresh token call is made will not be allowed, and your access token anyway is going to expire in 3 seconds. So if that works for you, then you can also use the same thing. But if you also want to expire your access token, then you might need to add the access token expiry here, another column or something. Okay, and refresh token payload will have the user ID and the refresh key and the access key as well. So whenever refresh token call is made, right, so whenever we generate the refresh token, we have a key using which this refresh token is generated. So whenever we receive that refresh token request method, we need to make sure that that refresh token uh, call is coming from this access key only. I mean from this JWT access key only, not any other key. So in this way, like if you use the different access key to generate the refresh token, then you will not be allowed. And then we are calling the generate token, and we are returning the access token, refresh token, and expiry in. Let me do one thing. Let me put this in another method actually, because we need the same thing whenever we calling the refresh token API. So let me put the async def generate tokens, and we need the session here. We need the user model. So I can return here this method. I can pass the user model and session. So this should give us the refresh token, access token, and all. Here I don't think we have a first name and last name, so we have name only. So let me remove this, and this is fine. So if you go to our test case and try to run the test cases, and let's see how many of them are passing now. So there is some error, and this says FastAPI error, invalid arg for a response field, hint check the class FastAPI security auth 2, something like this. Let's go to our code. So here in the login API, right, we are using the auth 2 password request form. So whenever we use this type hinting, right, we need to say depends. And if you check, this depends is coming from FastAPI. So we need to add this dependency. And after adding this, if we try to execute the code again, you can see that our test case is running, but one of them is failing. So we'll see that. So this got failed. Assertion error, assert invalid email or password. So here we are actually doing some assertion message. And if we go to our test case, so in case if we provide the wrong password, right, we should get this message. But instead we are getting some different message, invalid email or password, and this says incorrect email or password. So let's say copy this message and put that in our code. So this way you can also put a logic like what you are returning as a error response or something. So that will be also considered. Now you can see that our all the test cases are passing and our login API is implemented. So if we go to our browser and actually let's say refresh the documentation here, you will see the login API here. So we have already created a user account, right? And you can see the author token doesn't have anything right now, and user table has this user. So let's try to log in. If I click on execute, incorrect email or password, I can't remember the password what I added. So let me see, 123. Yes, so it was a secret at 123. So you can see that we are getting the 180 second, that is 3 minute time for our JWT token. And if we actually check what this payload contain in the access token, right? So for that we can go to jwt.io, and here you can actually paste the token. So you can see that our token contains the sub, that is again encrypted, and a value, that is again encrypted, and r, this is also encrypted, and we have n, this is also encrypted. So by looking at the JWT token, no one can understand what you are passing here. Okay, and if we look at the refresh token, that is also a JWT token. So we can copy and paste that here as well. So you can see that it also has the sub and the t and a value. So this is different than what we have in the access token, and this is also encoded version. So we have successfully implemented our login API and test cases for that also. So now let's create the refresh token API. For that, let me go to this user directory. Let me expand this little bit. And here I will create another file. So I will say test refresh token. Okay. And here we can say def test refresh token, and we'll get the client. For now, I will say pass, and let's discuss what we want to test in the refresh token API. Okay, so first thing that we want to test, that users should be able to refresh the token with a valid refresh token. Second thing we want to validate, users should not be able to generate the login token with invalid refresh token. You can put any other logic. Let's say you are passing the refresh token as a empty value, as a null value, or let's say if you are uh, trying to check if it's a SQL safe, so you are passing 1 = 1 as a refresh token, something like that. You can put any validation that you want, but for this tutorial, I think this is fine. So only two test cases. So in the refresh token, what we need to pass? We need to pass the refresh token that we have, and for that we need to create the token first. So to create the token, let's say use the same method, and if we go to our services, right? So here we have uh, this generate token method. Here we need to pass the user and the session. So if we pass the user and session, this will give us access token, refresh token, and expires in. So let's actually call this method directly in our test case. So we can say data, and this data will be await this method, and we need to pass the user. So user, we can get user, and we can get the test session as well. So we can pass the user and test session. So here we will get the this will contain the access token and the refresh token. So we can import this. Why this is throwing an error? Await allowed only for async function. Is this not async function? Okay, let's make it non-async, because our test case is not async, so that's why we cannot use that. And since we have changed this to non-async, we need to remove the await here as well. So I think this is fine. We have not used async await anywhere in this function, so this is fine. And now we need to call the API. So we can say response equals to, and we can say client dot post. This is also going to be a post method, and this will be refresh. In the payload, I don't want to send any data, so I will just send empty data JSON. This will be a empty data, and header I will send. So I want to send the uh, this refresh token in the header. So I can create the header, and this will be. So here we are getting all the tokens. We are extracting the refresh token, and we are passing that as a form of header. So this response should return 200. Also, we can check if the response contains the access token key and the refresh token key. This assertion we can also put inside our login. We have actually already added this, so that is fine. And second test case we want to put, user should not be able to generate the login token with the invalid uh, refresh token. So for that, let me copy and paste this here. Just a refresh token with invalid token. So here I will put some invalid refresh token, some random value, and this should return 400. And we can say access token not in response and not in response. So this is fine. If we go and run our test case, these two should fail. So this is failing. There is error here, type error. I think it's not a header, actually it's a headers. So we can say headers. And if we run again, this will again fail, but we should not get this error. Right, now it says 404, that means we have not created the API. I want to tell you one more thing. So currently we have 16 plus to 18 test cases. So let's say you are building a very big application, and you have 400 test cases. And every time running this PyTest command will take some time. And if you are working on a particular feature, you don't want to run all the test cases the same time, right? Every time you run the test. So you might want to run a particular test file, and or you might want to run a particular test case. So to use that, what you can do, you can just put the file path here. So in our case, this is the file that I want to execute. So I can just copy this and paste this here. And if I press enter, you will see that it has executed only 2 test cases. So from now onwards, I won't be running all the files. I will run only a specific file that I am working on. So let's build the refresh token API now. And for that, let's go to the code base. And if we go to the route file, let's copy this and paste this here. So our API is going to be refresh only, and this will return 200. That is fine. Response model is also fine. We won't be needing this. Instead, we will need the refresh token, which we will get in header. Okay, and this actually this HEAD here, and this will be a function. This we can import from the FastAPI. So we can say header, and we can pass the refresh token inside our function call. And here we can say get the refresh token. I want to write the refresh token logic here. So I will say async def refresh token and refresh token session. So this will be our parameter for this method. And I have the code prepared, but I will walk you through this process because I want to explain the expiry and all. So let's get the token payload first. And for that, we have created a method inside our security, and that is get token payload. So it needs token, secret, and algorithm. So we can call this method. if you notice one thing, so here I have used the secret key instead of JWT secret. And why I have done this? So if you notice here, here we are generating the access token and this is being generated using the JWT secret. But our refresh token is being generated the application secret. That means same secret will not work for the access token as well as for the refresh token. Okay. So that's why I have used the secret key. And this is, in my opinion, this is a good practice to keep two secrets for the access token as well as in refresh token. Algorithm is same, but you can put also a different algorithm that your JWT library supports. For now we have the token payload, and we can say if we don't get any payload, right, that means whatever token was passed, that was invalid token. So we can raise a exception, status code 404, and we can say now we have the token, so we need to get our parameters. So in the refresh token, if you see, we are passing the refresh key, that is T, and we are passing the access key, that is A, right? So to get that, we can actually check here, refresh key equals to token payload dot get T, and access key is our token payload dot get A as a access key. So access key and the refresh key we have here. Apart from that, we have also user ID as a sub, so we can also get that. But if you notice, this is encoded, so we need to decode that. So we can say str decode. Now we have the refresh key, access key, and user ID. If we go to the database, right? So in the database, let's go to this user tokens, and if I go here, you will see that we have the access key as well as the refresh key. So this is basically not the our token. This is a key that we have added inside the uh, tokens. Okay, so we can query this data based on the key that we have. So if the access key or the refresh key is different inside our refresh token, right, we should not get this particular record, and in that case we can say the key is invalid. And we will also check this expire at. So you can see the expiry date is 24th, and today is actually 23rd, so it expires tomorrow. So we will also check if it expires or not, and we'll also see what we are going to do once we regenerate the refresh token. So if we go to the code, for that we can query this. So we can say user token equals to session dot query, and this will be user token dot filter, and here we are going to put the filter by using these three things. So if we notice inside the refresh token, so the sub is the user ID, not the ID of the this token. If you want to put the ID of this token, right, you can also put that, but currently we have added the user ID, so that is fine. And let's complete the query. So user token dot refresh key, and this is going to be equals to refresh key, and another condition, user token dot access key, this is going to be access equal to access key, and user token dot user ID equals to, this will be double equals to user ID, and then we can say first. So this way we will if we are getting the record, that means our refresh token is valid because we have those keys inside our database as well. I also want to load the user model, so for that I will I put options here, and in the options I will put join loaded, and in the join loaded we can provide the model name and then the name of the relation. So let me import this join loaded. This is actually not joined, this is joined. So this joined loaded will be coming from we don't have SQLAlchemy here, so we can import that. So from SQLAlchemy.orm import joined loaded. Joined load actually, not loaded. So we can say if not user token, then we can throw an exception by saying that this is an invalid request. And if we have all those things, in that case what we should do? In that case we can just expire the refresh token that we have, and for that we can say uh, user token dot let me see the actually key name expires at. So one refresh token will be used only once. Okay, and here we can put one more condition to check if this user token is already expired or not. So let me actually put this condition here, user token dot this expires at is greater than date time dot UTC now. So if this is greater than current time, then only this token is valid, otherwise this is expired. And if it's a valid, then we can say expires now UTC date time dot UTC now. You can put a negative time here, but I'm just putting the current time, that after this it will not be valid. And then we can just commit this. So we can say now to return the response we can call this, and we can just return, and we need to pass the user, right? So we have this user token, and we can just pass the user, and session we can pass. So this way our refresh token logic is there. You can put a more complex logic. You can also encrypt your these keys, refresh key and access key, because currently I'm putting whatever key is being generated randomly, right? I'm just putting that in the DB, and that is also visible if you see the JWT uh, metadata. So if you want to make it more complex, you can just put it encrypt that, or you can put it differently, but it's up to you. I'm just telling you the process. And if we go to our test case and try to execute this, so this is saying 404. Let's check why this is happening. So we are calling the slash refresh API, right? 404 means that this is not found. So that means somehow we are missing that this API is not being declared. So if we go to our route, and here, so this is slash refresh, and we have added the prefix slash auth. So we need to use this prefix in our test case as well. So we need to append this slash refresh. And if I run the test case again, this should not give us 404. Okay, so this is giving 422. That means there is something missing in the request parameter, and I don't know, so I want to see that. For that, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to log the response. So in the response only we will get to know what is happening. So I will say logging.info. Let me import this logging, and I will say response.json. So info, and to display this log info, we need to add hyphen hyphen CLI hyphen hyphen log hyphen CLI hyphen label equals to info. If you change this to error, right, you don't need to pass this command to display the info, because the error is by default displayed. So this is the logging. It says type missing location header, and it's expecting the refresh hyphen token. But in our case, we are passing the refresh underscore token. So one thing to notice here, if you check the API, we are saying that we expected refresh underscore token. But if we need to pass the underscore, right, we cannot pass the underscore in the header. Instead, we need to pass hyphen. So refresh hyphen token, here also we need to pass the refresh hyphen token. If I remove the logging now, and let's remove this log label as well, and run this test again, you can see now this passes. So let's test this in our API, Swagger API. So for that, let's go to the DB and let's refresh this. So we have login and refresh token here. So let me go to user tokens actually, and I have one token. So I want to delete this because I want to show you fresh data. So this is our user token. Currently we don't have anything. So let me go and log in first. If I click on execute, you will see that our access token and the refresh token is generated. And if I go to the database, you will see that a token is generated that expires tomorrow. Today is 23 and tomorrow is 24. So what I want to do, I want to generate another token using this refresh token, and I want to see what happens then. So if I copy this refresh token, and if I go to this refresh token API and try, so here I need to pass the refresh token, and if I click on execute, you will see that another refresh token is generated. Here this says underscore 1CA, and this one is having A underscore 00. So this is a different refresh token. And if I go inside our database, right, you will see there is another record, and this contains a different access key, and this contains a different refresh key. And the old refresh token that we had generated, right, you can see that expires, that has been expired. So initially we saw that expires on 24th, but now once we generated a new refresh token, the older one is expired. So a refresh token cannot be used twice in that way. Next, I want to create a API for forget password. So in that case, I will send an email with a unique link so that user can click on the link and reset their password. So let's create another test case. Test forgot password. So for the forget password, I have four test case that I want to write. And again, it's up to you how many test cases you want to write. So I want to make sure that a user should be able to send the forget password request, and a user should not be able to send the forget password request with inactive or invalid email. Not invalid, not inactive, with invalid email address. If the user is not verified, he should not be able to send this request. And if the user account is not active, he again should not be able to send the forget password request. For this, I have prepared the test case again, and I'm just going to copy and paste here. So the first one, test user can send the forget password request. This is going to get the user, and this is again active user. And I'm just going to send this, and this will return 200 status code, because in the response we are not going to return anything, and we are going to send an email to the user. Second one, I want to test that a user cannot send a forget password request with invalid email address. So I'm just putting invalid email. So this is a string, not an email address. So in that case, we should get 422. And third one is unverified user should not be able to send. So here I am getting the unverified user. So this we have created the fixture for this. So we will get an unverified user. And here I am checking that inactive user should not be able to send the forget password request. So in that case, we will get the 400. In case of unverified also, I want to check the 400 instead of not uh, equals to 200. So this is fine. Now let's go and try to run our test cases. So in this case, I want to run this file, right? So let me copy, and this is test forget password. It's a forget password or forgot password? Forgot password. So if I run this, you will see that these 4 test cases would fail because the API doesn't exist. So 404 is fine. So let's go to our API route and build this API. So let me actually copy this one, and this will be again a guest router, and this is going to be forgot password. We will return the 200 in case of success. In the response, I'm not going to return this login response. Instead, I will return a JSON response like this. Email with the password reset link has been sent. So we need to create this method email forget password link. Let's go to the service, and here I want to create. So I will say async def forget password link. For now, I will say pass because I want to create a request and all. So here I will say data, and I will create a request class. So let's go here, and this I'm just going to say class email request. This will actually expect only one parameter, that is email address. So we can go here and import this. So I'm doing this very quickly. If you feel like I'm just too fast, you can pause the video or you can just slow down. Here again, I need the background task because I want to send an email. So I will just copy this from here, and I will put here as a dependency. So we have the background task, and okay. So in that case, since this will not be equal to, so since we are adding the background task, we need to pass that. So we can put the background task like this, and here we will send the data. So if we go inside this method, very simple method actually, and I want to validate that the user account is active and all. So for that, I can copy these two methods. Okay, I mean not method, these 4 lines, and here I can put this. We don't have the user, so user we can get, and we can say await load user. So we have used this earlier, and we need to pass the DB and email. So email we are getting from data, and the DB is session. So if the user is not verified, we won't allow uh, password I mean email to be sent, and if the user is also not active, then in that case also we will not allow to send the email address. Once everything is valid, then we can send the email, and we don't need to return anything. So for sending the email, I have prepared the email code. So let me just copy and paste again. So let's go to our email service, and let me put this here. So here we need to create this context, and let me put this here inside this utils. So this will be, we can say password reset. Okay, so this context is just to tell, like let's say uh, if you are generating a too many, let's say links, right? So someone clicks on the forget password, and same time someone clicks on any other link that also usually updated at and the last 6 character of the password, so they will get the same link in both the request. So I'm just separating them using this context. So we have the forget password context. We can just import this. So here in this email, what I'm doing, I'm again just using the same thing what we have used here in other emails, and I'm assuming that reset hyphen password will be the front end URL, and I'm passing the app name and the activation URL, and our HTML template is going to be this password hyphen reset dot HTML. So let me create this. Let me copy and put the HTML. So this is similar to our user activation, but this will have a different link and a little different message. So our email logic is ready. We can copy and put this code inside our service. So here we can say await, and this method we need to pass the user and the background task. Let's import this. So our forget password API is also ready. We can go to our test case again, and let's make sure that we have used /auth. So this is fine. If we execute our test case again, it should pass. So all the test cases are passing now. And if you want to see the email, so if we go to the browser, now you will see that there is no email. So if you want to see the email, we can go to our code. Okay, and inside this config, if you want to just enable for this, right, so what you can do, you can copy this line and go to your test case. So I want to enable in the first one only, so I can put this here fm, but fm is not yet imported, so we can import this fm. And I don't see the correct one, so let's copy. So fm we can import from config. So let's import it here, and if I execute the test case again, we should see an email. There is still no email, so let's go to the code again. So we copied this code, but we did not change the value, so we need to change this to 0. And after that, if we run the test code again, we should see that this is working. And if we go to the browser, so you can see the email, and now it's evening time, that's why you see the dark mode here. So let me make it feel light, so you can see this. So this is how you will receive the email. One more API is remaining in our authenticated system, so that is the reset password API. So let's create the test cases for that, and we can say test reset password, and in this let's write what we want to test. So user should be able to reset his password with the valid token. So here we can say user should be able to reset his password with a valid token. So these are the 4 test cases that I'm going to write. You can extend this to as many as you want. So first is user should be able to reset his password with a combination of valid token and valid email. And user cannot reset a password with invalid token. So if the email is valid but token is not valid, he should not be able to do that. In other case, if the token is valid but the email is not valid, then he should not be able to reset the password. And let's say if user is using the valid email address as well as valid token, in that case also, if the email is for the different user and the token is for the different user, right, he should not be able to reset the password. So these are the 4 test cases that I would like to write. So let's write our first test code. Before that, I want to put a new password actually, because we are going to reset the password. So I will say new password, and this should be different than what we have here. So here we have this password. Let me just copy this, and I will make only one character different. So here instead of 123, I will put 321. So this should be a different password, and let's define our method. So we can say test reset password. Let's prepare the data. So what we want to send for the reset password. So if you remember the email, if I go to this email, you will see that we need the token and we need the email address. So these two is required. So we can say token and email. Email, we can just put the user email. Apart from this, we need the password, and this password is going to be new password. So these are the three things that we require whenever we are trying to reset the password, right? For this token, if we go to our code base again, right, in the service, so how we are getting this token? If I go to this user service and in email service, so you can see that we are getting the string context from the user model, and then we are hashing that password. So this is how we are getting the token. So let me copy this code because we need this in our test case. Here I will create a separate method, get token. Okay, and in this one I will put the code whatever I have copied, and this user model I will receive as a parameter, and I need to import this hash password. This password also I can import this, and let me return this. So if I pass the user object here, so whatever the token need to be for this user, right, I will get it from here. So this is the same logic what I'm putting inside the email. If you want to create a separate function, you can create a separate function and call that here as well, and in your test case that is also fine. But here I will get the token, and let's just call the API now. So we can say client.post, and for this I want to make a put API, not the post API. So I will say put, and we can say slash auth slash reset password. We can pass the payload by saying JSON equals to data. That's it, and then we can assert a response 200. If we get the 200 status code, that means our API is working, but we don't know that if the password has been reset or not, right? So in that case, what we can do, we can call the login API here, and if we are able to log in, that means our password has been reset. So for that, in the data itself, for the login, we need the username and the password, right? So what we can do, we can delete this token value. So we can say del and data. Here I can say token. So our data object will have only these two, and we can call the login API. And one more thing, if you remember this, in case of our login API, na, this is not actually email. This is username. So we need to change that to username. So we can say del data and the email, and we can say data username equals to user.email. And I'm just checking if we get the 200 status code. I'm not checking if this has the access token, refresh token and all, because that is the responsibility of the login test case. So if we get the 200 status code, that means user was able to log in. So that is fine. So this is our first test case. In the second one, what we have written with the invalid token, right? So for that, let me copy and duplicate this. So test reset password invalid token. And now instead of this token, I will put some random value, and this would be 400. and also user should not be able to log in with the new token, with the new password. So this is fine. Next I want to test the invalid email. So in this case I will get the correct token, but I will pass the invalid email address that is not a valid email. So I will just say describely.com. So in that case I should receive 422, and again I should not be able to log in with the new password. In the last one, I want to pass a valid email address, but I want to pass a different email address. So let's check what is the email address that we are using. We are using kesari@describely.com. So let me actually pass here nandan@describely.com. So if I use the token from this user who is having the email address kesari@describely.com and the email nandan@describely.com, again we should not see the 422, we should see the 400, and new password should not work for the user. Okay, so this is fine. Let's try to run our test case. So this is a test reset password. Let me change this to reset. You can see all three test cases are failing, but we had the 4 test case, so why we see 3? 1, 2, 3. Okay, so the name is same, that's why we don't see. So test reset password invalid different email. Okay, we can see the 4 test cases now. Let's write our API, and for that let me close this. Let me copy this route, and here I can put a reset password. I will not get the email request, instead I will get a reset password request, and this will have the email and password, and also I will have the token. So these three things I will have. So let's use this class request in our request body. Import this one. I don't need the background task because I don't want to send any email and all. But if you want to send an email once the password has been reset to you, to your user, you can use the background task to send this. I will pass the data and all, and here I will say your password has been updated. This will be reset password. Let's copy this method and go to our code base. Here we first need to check when the request comes, right, if user exists or not. So again we can just copy these lines and put it here. I will suggest to create a separate method and put these 4-5 lines, because there are a couple of methods that is using this, so you should not repeat the code, but for this session I am just going to copy and paste, and that is fine. I don't want to display this message when someone is trying to reset the password. uh, I am just going to say invalid password reset link. So once we make sure that user is verified and his account is also active, now we need to verify that whatever token has been passed in the request, right, that is a valid token. So for that we need to again generate the token. So we can say user token, and from the user object we can say let's go to the user model and copy this method, get context string, and here we need to pass the forget password context. So we can say context equal to, now we can again put a try like we did here during the user account activation. So like this, or if you want you can just copy these lines and put the same. So here we can verify if the token is valid or not. So if the token is not valid, then we'll throw an exception. This link is either expired or valid. So we can say invalid window or whatever message you want to put. And if everything is valid, then we can just reset the user password. So we can say user.password equals to hash password and data dot password. So this password will contain the new password that user has sent, and we can also update the updated ID so that link is not valid anymore. And that's it. We don't need to return anything because we are not returning the user object and all. So this way user password will get updated. And if you want to trigger an email, right, this is the point. You will refresh the user object here by saying dot refresh, and then you will call your email service to notify the user that his password has been updated. But I am not doing that, so I will just say here notify user that password has been updated. That's it. So if we go to our test case and try to execute them, this is failing again. It says 405 not allowed. So 405 is method not allowed. So if you remember in our test case what we have created, our test case is actually using the put method here. And if we go to our route, we have made this post. So we need to change this to put. And I think it should work now. Two of them are failing, but two of them are passing. So this says 422 and it says none type object has no attribute verified it. Okay, so what we are doing, we are not checking if the user exists or not. So this is another thing. Let's go to the service. So here we are getting the email and we are directly checking if the verified it is there or not. So we need to check if the user exists or not with the email. So we can say if not user and then throw an exception, invalid request. And second one is failing 422. So let's check that why this is failing. Here you can see the unprocessable entity, but I don't see the message what is failing. So I need to put a log actually, and this is the test reset password, and this is the login API is failing actually. So username, I'm not sure if I have a typo and all. So let's go there, and here our login API is failing, so we are not able to log in. So we are passing the data user.email, and okay, let's create the new data actually. Let's not make this messy thing. So we can say login data, and this is going to have the username, and this username will be email of the user, and we will have the password, and that password is going to be new password, not the old one. And we can pass the login data, and this should be fine. If we go to our login, okay, are we doing anything? Okay, so in the login API we are not passing the JSON, we are passing the data. Okay, so we don't need to pass the JSON, so that's why it was failing. So if we go to reset password again, uh, we need to pass the data. So this is the reset password. Here we need to pass the data. And why we need to pass the data? Because if we go to our login API, right, you will see that we are expecting the auth to password request form. So this is a multi-part. This is expecting the multi-part form data, not the JSON. So that's why we need to pass the data. And if I run the code again, I think it should pass now, but it's failing. Says for 22 unprocessable entity. So we have missed something again in the login API. Did I not change this? Okay, so I changed the data, but not at the correct place. So I have modified actually here, not in this API. That's why. So let me just revert this. Let me put Control Z, because this test case was fine. We are calling this, and we need to pass this as a data. And again, I am not changing this to JSON. So let me change this everywhere. Data, data, and data, so that all the test cases are same. And this data should be in the login API, not in the reset password API. So in the reset password API, it's a JSON, and in the login API, it's a data. So this should be JSON, this should be data, and this should be JSON. This is JSON, and this should be data. This is JSON, and this should be data. And rest is same. So these three values also. Let me make sure that all the test cases having the same thing. Now this should work. Perfect. So we have successfully created all the API required for the authentication purpose. So if I go to our Swagger API, you can see that we can create the user, we can verify the user account using this API, then we can log in the user, and we can refresh the token for the user, and also we can uh, send a reset password email to the user, and we can reset the password using this. Now let's run all the test cases together and see if that works or that is failing due to any intended regions. So let me just remove this file name and run this. Oof, so all of them are passing, and we have created 25 test cases. Now I want to write two more APIs that is going to use this access token, because till now, if you see, no API is requiring the access token that we get uh, using the login API. So let's say if you are building application and you want to protect some of the APIs, right? How can you protect that? And how can you write the test cases for that? So let's write that. So I want to write a API that it requires the authentication. So let's create a test get user py. So here I will be using the token to get fetch the user detail, and if the token is not valid, I should not be able to fetch the user detail. So this is the basic two tests that I'm going to write. If you want, you can add more test cases. And my API is going to be /users/me. So whatever user is authenticated, right, I'm just going to fetch detail of that user only. And for this, if let's write the test case. So we can say def test fetch me. Okay, and I will get the client and I will get the user, so that I can get a verified user. I don't need to pass any data, and this is going to be a GET request. So we can directly call the API response, and we can say client dot get, and we can say slash users slash me, right? And we need to pass the token, the login token. So that will be passed as a part of header. So we can say header equals to, and this is going to be authorization header. And if the response is if we see the 200 status code, so we can assert that assert response dot status code equals to 200. That means our API is successful, and we can also assert that we get the data in this API. So we can verify that we are getting the same user detail. So we can assert this assert response dot json, and this will be a dictionary. So we can say email equals to user dot email. So if we are getting the user email, this user email, that means we are getting the detail of this user itself. If you want to add any other assertion, you can add, like you can verify the ID. So it's always going to be one, because we delete the tables and create the tables in every API call, in every test call. So I'm not going to do that. So how can we get this token? So if you remember in the refresh token API test, right? Here we are calling this generate token, and we are getting the refresh token. So in the same way, we can use this method to get the access token. And this session, test session, we can get it from here. And now we have this data, and this data is going to contain the access token. So this is how we can pass the authorization. And you have already seen that in the refresh token itself, whenever we need to pass the header, we can pass headers equals to then this value. So we can use the same thing here. So this way we are passing the access token as a authorization header, and we'll check if the token is valid or not in our request. Okay. Let's write a second test case. Test fetch me invalid token. I'm very bad at naming the things, so you can name it better, I believe. But here I will get the token. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to take everything till -2. So I will remove the last two character, and I will add two random character here. Although this is not 100% safe to test this, because maybe uh, if you remove the two character, right, and you are putting 2R, so maybe your token contains the last two character as a 2R. So in that case it will work, but I don't think for the testing purpose this is going to work. So let me actually remove the 6 character, and let me put 6 characters here, so that it's more safe. Okay, so this will have an invalid access token. So actually this should not return the 400. So whenever you are fetching the user detail with a token that is not valid, this should return the 400 instead of 200. And actually we can change this to something like this. We can say email not in response.json. So we can check that the status code should not be 200, and it should not contain the user object or user detail. So you can also check it should not contain the ID and any other fields. So this is fine. If we go and try to run this test case, right, this should fail. I should have run this only this test case. So let me actually put this here. So this is failing. Now let's go and create the API. So let's go to the routes, and here I want to actually put this. So here we have guest router, and you can see here we have a user router. But whatever we have added in the user router, right? If we go to the document here, you can see that doesn't require the authorization, but I want the authorization. So for that, I am just going to create another router here, and I will call this auth router. And in this auth router, I'm just going to add the dependencies. So this dependency will be dependencies, and this will be a list, and we can call the depends. And what this is going to depend on. So if we go to our security, right, here we have created one auth2 scheme. So this is going to be dependent on this auth2 scheme. So let me copy and put this. Let me import this from there. So security, and we can say auth2 scheme, not the FastAPI security. So we can say from app.config.security import auth2 scheme. And I also want to make sure, so I think this is fine. So if I go to this browser again, and if I refresh the page, you won't see that log here because we have not added any route. So if I copy this, and if I use this auth router here, and I change this to me, this will return the 200, and this is going to return the user response. And it will not have any request object, it will have just the session, and we can return whatever is written from the service and remove this. We can say fetch user detail. And if I go to the browser again and refresh this, we still can't see that lock, right? And why this is happening? So if we go to our code base again, we have added this router, but this router is not a part of application yet. So let's go to our main.py, and you can see here we have added the user router and the guest router. So let's add that auth router as well. Now this is a part of the application, and if I refresh the page, you can see the authorize button here, and also you can see the /user/me, but currently this is put, so let's make it get. So this is get now. If I try this, it would throw an error and all, not authorized. So currently I'm not passing the token, so that's why it says not authorized. So if we go to our code here only, so in auth2 scheme, right, auth2 scheme will detect the authorization header, and this will also can be used to authorize the user. So for that, if we go to our security, and here we have defined the auth2 scheme, and this is using the /auth/token, and now we need to somehow decode the token and get the payload, and get the user detail from the payload. Okay, so for that, if I scroll down a little bit, you will see that we have a method called get token user. So this we can use to get the token user, and then we have this method get token payload. So this will give us the payload, but our payload will not contain the username and all, because we have modified this in a different way. So if we go to our user service, right, uh, here, and if I go to this generate token method, so you can see our payload is going to contain a, that is access key, and r, that is going to be the user token table ID, and sub, that is going to be the user ID. So let's extract that first. So let me remove this code because this is from coming from another tutorial that I was uh, working on. So I can say user token ID, and this we will get from the payload. So we can say payload dot get, and this will get in a key called R, and we will get the user ID as well, and this is going to be in payload dot get, and we can get this using the sub, and we also get the access key, and this we can get by saying payload dot get a. So if we go to the service again, you can see the access key is not encoded, but our user token ID and sub is encoded. So we need to decode those two fields. So we can say method name is str decode. Str decode. So we can pass this here, and this also we can decode. We can say str decode. So now we have the user token ID, user ID, and access ID. We can make a call to the user token, and we can verify if the token is valid or not. So we can say user token, and we have the session here. So we can say db.query and user token. Let's import this, and dot I will say options, because I want to load the user model as well, and we can say joined load, and here we can pass the users token dot user. So this will load this relation as well, and let me go to the service and make sure that this is correct. Actually here we are making the query. Let me copy the entire query. So here the session is called db, and the joined load is not yet there, so let me import that as well, and this is coming from SQLAlchemy.orm. So let me import that. We don't have the refresh key, but here we have the access key, right? So let me put this line here, so we can say access key and the access key, and apart from that we have already added the access key. We can use the token ID. So here we can use the ID, and this is user token ID, and we have the user ID as well. So we have the user ID, and we can check if the token is expired or not, and if we get the token. So if user token, that means our token was valid and it was not expired. In that case we can return token user, user token, actually user token dot user. So this will this is the basically user token model, and this is the user model. So this we will return the user model. With this we can get the user detail from the token, but I don't want to use the token explicitly. I just want to use the request, right? And for that I'm just going to create another method, and that I will use as a dependency. So let me say this async, and def, and I will say get current user, and this current user, I will call this current user as a dependency, and this will give me the current user. And here I will say token, and this token will be a string, okay, and this will depend upon the auth2 scheme, depends on auth2 scheme that we are using there. So let me just import this depends from the FastAPI, and apart from this I will also get the db here. So this TB will be session, and this will also depends upon get session. So let's import this get session, and session will also come from the SQLAlchemy ORM. So now we have our token as well as our session. So we can get the user using this method, get token user. So we can say user equals to await get token user, and we can pass the token and DB. So if the token is valid and it has all the payload and is not expired, right, we will get the user object. So we can say if user is there, then return the user, otherwise throw an exception. So we can raise an exception, and this exception we can import from the FastAPI, and we can return the status code by saying 401 and message not authorized. So this should work, and I'm just going to use this method in our route. Okay, so here you can see that I have added the auth to dependency, right? This dependency will make sure that we have the authorization header, but this will not make sure that whatever token is passed in the header, right, that is a valid token, and we can get a user detail from the request. So for that I will also add the dependency here, this get current user. So this get current user, what it will do, it will use the token to get the user, and if it gets the user then it's valid, otherwise it will throw the 401 exception. So in this way our API is secure. And to get the user detail, instead of this session, right, I can just say user equals to depends, and I can pass this get current user, and I can return the user directly. So in that case I don't need to write any code, and I will get the user detail. So if I go to the terminal, and if I run the test again, this should pass. Actually our test is failing. Let's see what is happening. So if I go to this code, right, uh, okay, so here is the mistake, we are not returning the user, so we need to return the user if the user exists. So this is fine. If I run the code again, again this is failing. So here is the issue. So we are saying be array, it should be bearer, and if I go to our test case, get user, so this should be bearer instead of array. And if you remember that we are not returning the 400 in case of invalid token, we are returning 401. So this should change to 401. If I go here and if I refresh the tests, so you can see all the test is passing now. Assertion error, assert email in detail. So this should be not in. And if I run the test case again, this has passed now. Now I want to create another API, basically one more API before I end this session. So this API is going to return the user detail. For that also I will copy the code, and I will use the auth router again, and here I will pass the I will use the primary key. So whatever user ID is passed, right, it should give us the user detail. For that I'm not going to use this dependency injection, and because when we use this user as a dependency, right, we are going to get the current user only, the logged in user, but I want to get any other user detail. So let's say I have a 2 user in the database, so I want to get the second user detail. So in that case, again I will return the user response, but now I need the session because I need to create a method to fetch the user detail. So this is going to this is going to be very simple method. So let me actually copy this and return this, and this will not have the data, this will have the primary key that we are getting from here, and this primary key we will get like this. Okay, so we have the primary key, we can say fetch user detail, and here we can say get user info. So if I go to this code again, and let me actually write the method here. So async this will have the primary key and session. So we can say user equals to uh, actually async def. So session dot query user dot filter, and here we can say user dot id equals to primary key, and we can also check, we have not checked the user and all till now, so we can directly check here user dot is active dot is, we can say true, and so user is active, then we can say first. I'm not going to check if the user is verified or not, so I'm just going to return the user detail. Okay, I'm just going to remove this active check also, because I'm fetching a different user detail, so I might not want to get the active user only. So this is fine, and here we can say if user, or we can directly return the user, I don't want to put any check and all. So if the user detail is there, then we'll get the user detail, otherwise we'll get the null. Let me display a message if the user is not there. So we can say if user, then return user, else raise an HTTP exception saying the status code 200 and detail user does not exist. Let's make it 400. So let's go to the route, and this method is fine. So if you see here, in this method we are not adding the dependency, but the dependency is added here. So this will make sure that the token is valid, and this dependency will make sure that the authorization header is present in the request, and then by passing the user ID we will fetch the user detail. So for this, let's say if you want to write the test case, right, uh, in this only, if I go to this get user, I want to write the test case, I need to pass the authorization token, but I don't want to, let's say I have created only two users that request the user to be authorized. Let's say I have a 400 APIs that needs that request the authorization header. So copying these three lines of code is not very efficient, so I will tell you another way of doing this. So first let's write the test case. So we can say def test fetch user detail by id. Here we can get the client, and we can get the user, and for this we can again call this API, and now we need to pass the user ID. So let's make this a f string, and here I can pass the user.id, and I don't want to pass the header and all, right. So like this I want to execute. If I run this test, so it will fail. You can see the last one is failing, it's giving the 401. Try this. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to create another fixture, and here I have the client, right? I just want to duplicate this, and I will say this auth client. So this fixture will, whenever I use this fixture, right, the client will be already authenticated. Okay. So for that, I will need the token. So what I can do, I can just copy this method for one time, and let me import this quickly. So I have this method here, and here I have this test session, but I don't have the user. So let me actually add the user as well here. So this will be a verified user. So I have the user, I have the token and all right now, right? And I need to actually uh, add the header here. So I will make this variable client, and in this client, what I can do, I can just add the header. So I can say client dot headers, and in this headers, I will add the authorization, and this will contain the value of bearer space, and this will have the data, and inside this we will have the access token, and then I can return the client. So in this way, whenever I use the auth client, right, and I make a API request, API will already has this access token header. So I don't need to explicitly put that inside our API test case. So here instead of client, I can call the auth client, and I can use the auth client here. And if I run the test case again, this would pass. So this is throwing some exception. There is some import error. So if we go to this import must be before this is path. Yeah. So let me just copy and put it here after this. And if I run the test again, I believe this passes now. So you can see that we are able to fetch the user detail, and we don't need to explicitly define the header. So you can use the auth client for the API that needs the authentication, and you can use the client all the test cases that doesn't need the authentication. So let's run all the test cases for once and see how many test cases we have created. So total 28 test cases we have created, and all are working. If we go to our API documentation, if I refresh this, you can see that we have a slash user slash me that will give the authenticated user detail, and this will give the user info, whatever API key we pass. And if I try to access this without authenticating, I will, if I put one, right, if I click on execute, you will see that it says not authorized. So whenever you see a lock here, that means that API request authentication. So we have successfully completed all the APIs that we have discussed in the introduction section. I would like to request you to like this video and also subscribe the channel and share this with your friend so that it can reach to more people who may need it. Thank you so much for watching.